Thanks, thanks, Swagi, for having me, and thanks, ma'am, and Cathedral School for inviting us to address the students. Excited to be here, excited to share our experiences and relive those moments vicariously, all the jitters that we had when we applied and then went there and came back. Hope the hour that we spend together shall be useful to lend some insight on in what our experiences across the various schools have been like. I know this is a very interesting time. I think an opportune time where all the 12th standard students are looking to apply and figuring out what the rest of their start of the career will be like. And it's also very interesting because of the situation we are in. Are we going to be able to fly, not able to fly, so on and so forth. So I'm sure we'll get a bunch of perspectives on that as we go along. So without much ado, let's begin. What I'm going to try and do is just go around the panel. I think we have about 8 or so panelists here from the various 7 or 8 different colleges that Swagi spoke about. And let me start by calling on each one of them just to give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll go into their experiences of college as we go along. Yeah. So can we start with Rishabh Cornell?
Yeah, thanks so much, Vikas. So hi everyone, my name is Rishabh Gupta. I graduated Cornell in 2006 with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering. I volunteer my time a lot for Cornell actually, and in multiple ways. I'm the president of the Cornell Club of Mumbai. I serve as India co-chair for the Cornell undergraduate admissions at Alumni Ambassador Network, and I'm a member of the CUC, which is the Cornell University Council. As an aside, my wife went to Cathedral, and now my daughter is also in Cathedral. Back to you, Vikas.
Great. Thanks, Rishabh. Avanti, Columbia.
Thanks, Vikas. Hi, guys. I'm Avanti. I am a Cathedral baby through and through. I was there from transition, I think it's now called something else, but I was there from transition through to the 12th. I attended Columbia, graduated in 2008 with a BA in Neuroscience and Behavior. Did management consulting after that, and then went to Dartmouth for my MBA. And graduated from there in 2014. So although I'm here representing Columbia and that's all I'm going to talk about, I can speak a little bit to the difference between a more rural college and a very urban one, if that's of interest to anybody.
Great. Thanks, Avanti. Paritosh, Stanford.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. My name is Paritosh. I did the IB in Bombay International School. I graduated in 2015 and then went to Stanford, where I finished in 2019. After that, I have been at U Chicago, so I can speak to that as well. We don't have anyone from there. And I'm doing a master's right now. And my degree at Stanford was in art history and religion, and I'm doing religion and education at U Chicago.
Thanks, Paritosh. Priyam, MIT.
Hi, I'm Dr. Priyam Pillai. I didn't go to a prestigious school like Cathedral, but I went to UC Berkeley as an undergrad, and I did my master's and PhD from MIT. So I can talk quite a bit about admission to UC if anybody is interested, but I'll probably focus more on the MIT experience as a graduate student, as well as my experience teaching undergraduates and what what kinds of lessons we can draw from there.
Thanks. We go to Shashwat Yale. Is he there? I think we don't have Shashwat. Parmeet?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Vikas. So I actually graduated from Dhirubhai Ambani International School, did my IB diploma from there. Then I went to Yale for my undergrad, I got my BA in economics. And then I did a master's in real estate development from Columbia. And now it's been 10 years since I've been back in Bombay, and I mostly, I have sort of an entrepreneurship background. So, I lead a real estate business, and I actually started my own school about 4 years ago, and also have a non-profit startup. So, anyone having questions about, entrepreneurship or business, I'm more than happy to give my 2 cents.
Thanks, Amit. Anam, Princeton. I think Anam's not.
No, it's actually Abhimanyu. He's just trying to log in. So let's. There he is. There he is. Hi, Abhimanyu. He's there. Vikas, it's Abhimanyu. He's there.
Okay. Hi, Abhimanyu. We're just doing a quick, brief intro of your background context to your.
Sure. So sorry I'm late. There was some confusion about the link and some stuff, but my name is Abhimanyu. I went to Cathedral. I was class of 2014, and then I went to Princeton for 4 years and was class of 18 there. At Princeton, I studied mechanical and aerospace engineering, and I was also a member of the varsity squash team there. So that's a little bit about me. I don't know how much detail we're going for.
Oh, that's perfect.
Great.
Great. Harshit, Dartmouth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Harshit. I am a current student at Dartmouth College. So I started in 2018 and I would be graduating in 2023. So I took a gap year with some of my friends because of the pandemic. We figured that, it's better to be on campus and take the use of all the resources than to just take classes online, evidently. So I am probably the youngest panelist here. So I would be more attuned to answering questions about college life in 2021. Pandemic and non-pandemic as well. I did my schooling from Ryan International School, Vasant Kunj, New Delhi, and I'm majoring in computer science and sociology. So that's a double major.
Great, thanks. Okay, so my screen seems to have frozen. Did I miss anybody from the panel? I think we've covered everyone, right? My screen is frozen, so I'm not being able to tell.
I think you've covered all the panelists.
Yeah, I think covered it. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so let's start with talking about what your experiences have been like. Starting with the application process. I'm going to keep the questions a bit broad in that sense. Use your own context, panelists, to lend color. But the idea is, when you were applying, for some of the younger graduates who are out there, or current students, what was your application process like? For some of the older students here, graduates here, what was your selection criteria, if you will? So trying to just understand sort of the preschool process is, if you can lend some insight in that, because that's sort of what the next year will look like for the Cathedral students here, right? So, can I probably start with sort of the younger graduates in that sense on this one, Paritosh, Stanford?
Sure, I can go ahead. I think my application process was normal to start with. I was told that, I need to work on my extracurriculars, do something unique. And I tried to do that. And I did that over the summer, especially after my 11th standard. And then I came to writing essays. And I think I also worked for the Stanford admissions office. And people are really just looking for you to be honest and be yourself. So I think that is not some kind of like a marketing gimmick. I think in terms of writing your essays, just be clear about making a point. And I think it's really as simple as that. I think what you should put more research into is really understanding the differences between the various colleges that you're applying to. I think that it's not as though all the colleges represented out here are the same in any way. I think they're all very different. And I also think there's a lot of other colleges that may be great fits for you, for whatever reason, if you don't want to go to these colleges or if you don't get into these colleges. I mean, I'm in a master's degree program right now, and I think that some of the best students that we have are not from the colleges represented out here, but are from ones that are sort of considered lower. So I just wanted to say that to start with. When I went to my career advisor, they said that, you have to get a certain SAT score and you have to like have these grades in order to get into a college. I didn't have those SAT scores and stuff, and I still got in. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than it may seem on paper. And I just personally really, and I sort of went against my family for this and stuff. My family was like, oh my God, it's early action. You have to, like be strategic about it. And I was like, no, I really just want to apply to the best college that I think I can possibly get into, even though the career counselor is saying that I may not. So I went with my gut and I got in. But the process of how I chose Stanford over other colleges was just very strange, because my college counselor, I just said that I want to, aim big. And my college counselor said, okay, fine. So I'm going to give you the option between Yale, Harvard, and Stanford to apply for. And I was like, okay, so what do I do? And he was like, okay, so Stanford equals creativity, Yale equals leadership, and Harvard equals academics. And I was like, okay, cool, creativity, which is just the stupidest way to go about it. And I'm really happy that I went to Stanford and I loved my experience there. But it would have been really nice for me to learn more about the history of Stanford. I think as a humanities student at Stanford, which is much better known for engineering, it's really important to know like the environment you're going to get into. Stanford has a long history of debates about culture, debates about whether you're going to teach courses on the non-West, on what you're going to, like there's a lot of like history there, which I think really plays into how students interact with each other and stuff. So I think that as you think about what college you want to go into, really do think about the kinds of histories that are behind that. And if possible, speak to people who've done different majors at the same colleges, so you can get a sense of where you may fit.
Thanks, Paritosh. Harshit, Dartmouth, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I think Paritosh covered most of it, but I just like to break it into like two basic things that I thought for myself at least were very important. The first was obviously regarding the major and the academic side of it. And the second one was just like, life at college in general. So for the major in the college, I was very adamant on doing computer science from the start. I've been doing computer science since high school, a lot of projects in that area. So I was pretty clear on that. But as most of you would know, Ivy League colleges in general, but also like liberal arts colleges in the US provide you this flexibility to choose your major as you are in college. So I didn't decide to do sociology when I was in high school, but like when I was on campus, I figured that that's probably something I could also do along with CS. So I'm now doing a double major in sociology and CS. So the first thing you should probably look at is the flexibility of the program itself. So Dartmouth College provides a quarter system, which is different than a semester system in most of the other colleges. So I could like take 2 terms on and then be off another term, and so like plan my entire college attendance appropriately. And that has been really beneficial for me, considering I've been involved in a lot of extracurriculars and study abroads. Another thing I considered was the strength of the CS department at Dartmouth. That you should definitely look into, depending on if you've already decided what major you want to do. Another thing that I looked into was I was thinking maybe I could start my own company when I was in college. So I was looking into the entrepreneurial resources the college might have. Dartmouth has this fantastic thing called the Magnuson Center, which is funded by the alumni. And all Ivies have fantastic centers in entrepreneurship. So I definitely chose, what kind of resources would I be able to access if I was in this college. So that was also a factor in deciding which college I would select. Coming to the life at college, I think this is somewhat an underappreciated factor when people decide colleges. Like Paritosh, I also thought I should just apply to most colleges that I have a good shot of getting into, the best ones apparently, but I underestimated like what the life would be there. So talking from experience at Dartmouth, it's a very remote college. It's in the hills or the jungle apparently. Avanti might be able to relate to this. It's in the middle of nowhere, as we like to put it. And life there is definitely a lot different than a place like Columbia or Harvard, which are in central like Boston and New York City. So for example, there's very less places for us to go on a Saturday night or a Friday night, except like flats and dorms, dorm parties, which are like the center of the entire social scene. So I think that is something you should definitely talk to either existing students at college or just look up on Google. I'm sure you'll find a lot of resources. I did not take this into account. While Dartmouth has been great for me so far, it would have been absolutely the opposite. As I've seen for some people, just because, the weather is really cold compared to other areas. And you don't get to go out of campus that often. So definitely look into life at college and lodge and the things that really matter to you. So if that's Indian food, look at if it does really have Indian food restaurants. Dartmouth has only one, but I'm sure cities have many more. So these are small things you need to take into consideration as well. I'm sure seniors might be able to relate to this who've been into college programs at an elder age, but I'm sure like most of the undergrads definitely had the same concerns as me. So make sure you look into that as well.
Thanks, Harshit. Parmeet, want to talk about Yale?
Yeah,
Columbia,
absolutely. I think I'll start with what Paritosh said. He kind of put these three words on, Stanford, Yale, and Columbia. Oh, I'm sorry, Harvard. And I think he was exactly right. I actually wish that I had that counselor because, I didn't know that. My journey was really funny, honestly, and I think all of us being in India, we know, very little about these colleges, they're not very accessible. So you go on usnews.com or I don't know, whatever ranking site there is, and you look at all the rankings and, you're like, okay, from the top 10, I'm going to apply to 3, and then I'm going to, you do all of that, but each college is obviously different. And what's really important, I think pretty much the only takeaway I have is look at what the colleges are looking for. They tell you that, right? It's on their websites. So, and it's so true. Paritosh said, Yale equal leadership. And yeah, so my whole journey was actually someone from Yale made a presentation at Dhirubhai. Honestly, if that hadn't happened, I might not have been at Yale, because he very clearly stated that, we are looking for leaders. And I knew, I already at that point had kind of a leadership profile. I was the head boy of, my school before Dhirubhai. I was the head boy of Dhirubhai. And I had a lot of things, when it, to show for when it came to leadership. So the moment he said that, I knew, okay, I better apply to Yale. And actually, if I hadn't heard that, I might have just applied to 3 out of any of the 8, So I think that's the key takeaway for me. And, and that was kind of my journey.
Great, thanks. Abhimanyu?
Hi. So I think my journey was somewhat different than the other people in that I was recruited. And so if any of you are competitive athletes, you might know that there is this process called recruitment, which starts about a year before you actually would submit your application. And that process involves communicating with the coaches at the various schools and things. And so by the time you get to the application, a lot of the hard work is done. And so I was very fortunate that by August, so before most people had managed to finalize their schools, I already had likely letters from Harvard and Princeton. And so, that was incredibly fortunate, because that meant that all I had to do was submit an application and I pretty much knew I was getting in. But this whole process is very different because I was a recruited athlete. So if any of you are high-level athletes looking to get recruited, I'd be happy to talk more about the recruitment process. But so my experience was quite unusual in that sense, and why I chose Princeton over some of the other schools was it seemed like the best combination of the sport that I played, which was squash, and the team culture and things that I was interested in studying, which was generally around math and physics and engineering and stuff like that. So collectively, it seemed like the best place for that.
Thanks. Avanti, you want to take your take on this?
Sure. I don't think I have a lot more to add to what Paritosh, Abhimanyu, Harshit, and Parmeet said. But what I will say is that finally, once you're at the point of choosing where to go, and if you're fortunate enough to have a number of choices, go with your gut. Like, sometimes it is tempting to pick a college that you've gotten into just because it's the highest ranked or the most prestigious, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes that may not be the best one for you. And so I really think you need to think about, what gives off the best vibe, for lack of a better description, and what makes you feel like you will, or what makes you feel like will have the best environment for you at your particular stage in life. And for me, that was Columbia. I don't know if I would have applied to the same colleges now as I did, like back in 2003, which is almost 20 years ago. But I think you need to think more deeply about what works for you and what you want to get out of it.
Thanks, Rishabh.
Yeah. Hi. So I actually started out with trying to understand what courses are offered because I love math. I wanted to study engineering, and at the same time, I wanted to know more about hospitality and real estate. So after having researched the top few colleges, I figured that Cornell would actually give me that wholesome platform that I was looking for in terms of courses that I wanted to pursue. Besides that, I wanted to go to a small town just for that intimate setting, and the fact that it was an Ivy only sort of helped me move in that direction. Apart from that, I wanted to actually share some stats on an undergraduate applications that I think people here will find helpful. So for Cornell in the 2018-19 admission cycle, which is essentially the class of 23, there were 49,000 undergrad applicants, of which 5,300 were admitted and 3,200 enrolled. And 6,000 early decision applicants, of which 1,400 were admitted and almost all of them enrolled. So of 3,200 enrolling students, 44% were early decision, which is a really high number actually. And of the enrolling students, 55% were females and 45% were males. And 11% of them were international students. For fall 2021, which is the current year, we have 284 students going to Cornell, and which is almost twice the number from last year actually. So 249 are graduate students and 35 are undergrad, which is up from 29 last year. So the numbers are increasing. Cornell always had a low number of Indian undergraduate students applying and getting admitted, but we've seen that number increase over the last few years. Also, interestingly, 83% of the enrolling students were among the top 10% of the high school class. Apart from that, just interestingly, again, 75% of courses have a class size of less than 29 students, which I'm sure all Ivy League, all the schools represented here will have. So class size is really important as well. Just some snippets of facts, which I thought you'd find cool.
That is great, Rishabh. Thanks. And finally, Priyam, you want to talk a little bit about also maybe your teacher perspective of teaching undergrad? How would you like to address this?
Yeah, sure. I'll just briefly, MIT has the same sort of admission requirements as the other Ivy Leagues, except MIT it's a bit weird in the sense that it also wants a little bit of more of a science and engineering bent to your extracurricular activities and your things. So we had students that they're already kind of started a company or filed a patent or written a paper or some stuff like that, where they already kind of had a little bit more experience, thinking scientifically. MIT itself, the undergraduates have all sorts of requirements. So even if you could major in philosophy or sociology or music at MIT, but you would still have to take physics, chemistry, and mathematics in your first 2 years as an institute level requirement. Many universities have a history requirement or something like that, but MIT has a science requirement and mathematics requirement for all undergraduates. And so it's a little bit different experience than what you would get at an Ivy League. But MIT has a lot of you would think that MIT is all technical courses, but it's not. It actually has those non-technical courses that you could also major in, but many undergraduates do those, but they'll keep in mind that you're also expected to do the technical stuff as well as that. Another great program that many MIT kids take advantage of is they have a program at Harvard where you can take classes at Harvard as well. So whatever courses are offered at Harvard is also open to MIT kids, and you get credit as a regular MIT course. Harvard is 20 minutes away by bus. So if you are interested in taking courses that may not be taught at MIT, go to Harvard. MIT also has courses with Cambridge University in the UK, so you can spend an entire semester in Cambridge and exchange all those credits at MIT. So there are a lot of options for MIT kids, but just remember that they are looking for a very sort of science, engineering, mathematics, STEM focused kids right from the beginning.
Great, thanks. So let's now talk a little bit about real life experiences. I think a little bit about the acads for whatever it's worth, but probably more about the extracurriculars, and campus life. If you can share that, would be really useful, I think, for students here to get a peek into what each one of your sort of college lives, nuances of those particular college lives look like. So can we start again with Paritosh at Stanford?
Sure, I think I'll just keep it brief out here. I think what I would say is, and I'm sure a lot of people out here will tell you, and I would agree with them, that you should go in with an open mind and like explore different things. I think what was really interesting for me is that I chose to do art history because I really loved art and I really liked culture and I wanted to learn about it. But my reasons for continuing to do it were very different from just because I loved art. Like I took a class on theories and methods, which was in my junior year, where we were talking about how the history of art is tied with colonialism, how the history of art is tied with violence and knowledge, and the way that bodies are manipulated by governments and things. And I think like that's when I began to realize that the humanities can be a really political field. I didn't think that earlier. So my reasons for doing it changed. So I think that what I would say is it would be really useful for you to speak not just to professors, which I think is an extremely important thing to do in general, but also speak to a lot of different grad students and understand why they do what they do, regardless of which major they are in, because their reasons may be different from the ones that you would expect the major to be able to deliver for you. That's all.
Thanks. Harshit, you want to talk a little bit about Dartmouth life is like?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the life at Dartmouth is like shaped a lot by the quarter system, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. So there might be situations when you don't see your friend that you made your freshman. But well, first year you have to attend all 3 quarters, which is fall, winters, and spring. But like once you make friends freshman year, you usually don't tend to see them as often in the next 3 years because people would have quarter systems planned very interestingly. So you might not see your friend for like until the senior year, and you suddenly just run into them on campus. So the quarter system really decides the life on campus. So you must be aware of how that plays out into your preferences of what a college life should be. Another thing about Dartmouth is, like I said, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in New Hampshire. Hanover, New Hampshire, which is pretty much a jungle in my vocabulary. So most of the party stuff and most of the fun you'll have outside of academics would be in the Greek system. So for those of you who don't know, Greek system is essentially like student clubs, fraternities are for all the boys, and sororities are for all the girls, and there are other gender neutral houses as well. So at Dartmouth, you might have heard it's the partyest Ivy, which is definitely very true. And I think a large reason of that is because we have nothing else to do. We're just always in flats, always studying, or just hanging out and hiking. So that brings me to the third point about life at Dartmouth, which is it's a very outdoorsy school. So if you are not like in one of the Greek systems, or if you're not studying, you definitely are hiking or cycling or just hanging out in the neighboring area, which is pretty beautiful in terms of the nature, but definitely does not have the classical American vibe as a lot of my international friends would put it. So by the classical American vibe, I would say, big cities, daily night outs and that sort of stuff. It's definitely not there at Dartmouth, but Boston is pretty close. We have a direct shuttle from Dartmouth, I think from every morning 3 a.m. to every night 12 a.m. It runs every 50 minutes. It takes about 2.5 hours to get to Boston. So if you really want to go to cities and just experience friends there, you could definitely hop on in the morning and get back in the evening. But yeah, Dartmouth is very unique in the sense of because of its location. So definitely keep that in mind if you choose to apply to Dartmouth. And yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions if you reach out to me later.
Thanks. Parmeet, you want to talk about Yale? You're on mute.
Yeah, so at Yale, honestly, one of the most awesome things was the academic life that I had at Yale. And the funny thing is, I didn't even like academics too much till I went to Yale. So some of the things that you guys should be aware of. So most of the colleges here, the Ivy League colleges or the liberal arts colleges are very, very open, so I guess as Indians we are not used to that kind of an open system. There is a ton of choice. Okay, so at Yale, when I was there, we had to take 36 courses to graduate out of Yale, out of which you need to choose one major. But practically all the majors, to achieve that major, you only have to do 12 courses in that field. So just imagine 66% of the courses are practically, whatever you want to take. So I had a blast with that. I think I must have taken introductory courses in more than 15 different fields, from film to philosophy to anthropology, sciences, psychology. Like I was just, I was an economics major, by the way. So that I think was, I think this will be common to, most of the Ivy League schools, because that was what was really, really fascinating and fun for me. Apart from that, the architecture, and again, all these, I think now when I look back, I miss it so much. Like it's just all these campuses are just so beautiful. And social life, I think pretty much in most of these colleges is similar. Just the one thing to look out for is how frat driven the whole social life is. At Yale, it was really not much about fraternities. So yeah, that's pretty much from me.
Thanks. We're on you. Want to talk about Princeton?
Sure. Yeah, I think first I'd like to reiterate what Parmeet said about the opportunity to explore. I think that to me is the primary or the biggest value add for these sort of universities, because you can really do a psychology class in the morning, a math class in the afternoon, a history class at night, all taught by world experts. And I think there's very few places in the world that you can actually do that. And it's hard to see the value of that until, I'm 3 years out of college now. And it's only now that I'm starting to see the value of having that experience and being able to know a little bit about a lot. There's a book called Range, actually, by David Epstein, which I would recommend you all read, but it's about the value of being a generalist in an increasingly specialized world. But to get back to the question of extracurriculars, I had a blast at Princeton because I was splitting my time between my academics and also my athletics. And so as a recruited athlete, you are required to compete for the school. And so during the season, which ran from about October to March, you're traveling every other weekend. And so that ended up being about 15 different trips a year to all different parts of the country. We play all the Ivies, obviously. And so we traveled to Boston and New Haven and all sorts of things. And every 4 years, we also do a training trip to somewhere else. So I got to go to Italy for 10 days. Again, fully funded by the school. And it's not just Princeton that gives you these sorts of opportunities. I think most schools on this panel would give you similar opportunities. Other than athletics, I was also into the Outdoor Action Club, which is this hiking program that you're trained in outdoor skills, basically, and then you lead orientation programs in the wilderness. And from a social perspective, Princeton is a little bit different. They have these strange clubs called eating clubs, which it's very difficult to explain, but it's somewhat of a combination of fraternities and social clubs where they're co-ed. You eat your meals there, and once or twice a week they will host parties over there, but you don't actually live there, unlike a fraternity or a sorority, and they're also co-ed. So I think they're it's hard to really explain what an eating club is, but there's a good amount written about it if you're interested in finding out more about that.
Great. Avanti, you'll shed some light on Columbia.
Sure. So I would say that life at Columbia is kind of defined and circumscribed by three things. One is the core curriculum, which is a set of classes that every Columbia College student has to take. The requirements for the engineering school is a little bit different, but essentially the core looks at just how human thought evolved over the centuries through different fields. So there's four main courses that you take. It's masterpieces of Western literature, masterpieces of Western art, and masterpieces of Western music. And then there's something called contemporary civilization. That's essentially a philosophy class. And you start from like the classical era in or literature humanities. It started with the Iliad, and that's like a defining feature of your freshman year. You spend your first couple of weeks in college reading the Iliad, and then it kind of progresses a little bit. It's up to your teacher to assign what they want, but it kind of progresses into the 20th century. And I remember when in my class we ended with Margaret Atwood's A Handmaid's Tale. And what's really cool about the core is that, and brings me to my second point, is that you're not just reading in a classroom. You're studying it, and then you're going out into New York City and having this like 360-degree fully visual and sensory experience of a particular subject. So for example, for masterpieces of Western music, we went and saw one of Mozart's operas at Lincoln Center. For our art history class, we didn't study Monet in the classroom. We went to the Met, and our professor like took us around and gave us, just gave us the download, and we had our critical analysis and our discussions of Monet in this particular case, but also many others in the museums. So New York is really very much a part of your experience, but it doesn't have to be, because the campus itself is kind of physically isolated from the rest of the city, and as a result, it can be a bubble unto itself, but the city is there if you want it. And I think it's really up to each individual student how much or how little they'd like to engage with the city. You absolutely can do it through classes. Like there's this class that I did not take, but it's a class called the History of New York, and the professor will take you, or I think it happens in the spring or something, but the professor takes you on a midnight bike ride up and down Manhattan, which is like, I think really cool. I'm terrified of bicycles, so I didn't do it, but but a lot of my friends did, and for them it was, I think, one of the highlights of their life at Columbia. So yeah, so like the core, New York City, and I think the activities was the third point I was making. So Columbia is a very sort of engaged place, and when I was there, it was super political. It still kind of is, and that, I didn't really care much for politics back when I was a student, but I slowly got interested in it, because eventually you realize if you're not, you can't really call yourself apolitical and live in this world, right? So it really helps to it really helped me at least gain a more nuanced understanding of how politics plays into kind of your everyday life, even though you don't necessarily want to be fully engaged with it. And there's a ton of activities that you can do whether or not you want to be political. There's a Shakespeare club. There's like there's a musical that students put on every year called the Varsity Show that you can be involved with, and you can even start your own. So every school will give you that kind of flexibility and the opportunity to do that. So I would say step out of your comfort zone. If you can, don't just do something just because it's familiar and something that feels convenient. It's a really safe space. College is a really safe space to kind of push yourself and learn about something you didn't know before. And if you decide you don't like it or it's not for you, that's fine. You still learn something.
Thanks, Avanti. Phenomenal extracurriculars there. I think that's a lot of what the US experience is really about in that sense. It defines a lot of that in a lot of the years there. Rishabh, you want to talk about Cornell?
Yeah, absolutely. So your academic learning curve, at least my academic learning curve in my core curriculum, was pretty steady in terms of engineering, what I had sought out to learn as my major. But I think my personal development was really accelerated by the courses I took outside of engineering, and I think that's the theme out here that all the panelists are talking about. I took many courses in the arts and humanities, took courses in MBA, graduate level courses in the MBA school. And I think that's after I graduated 2006, and I think 14, 15 years after graduation, those are the courses that I remember the most and have become a very intrinsic part of me. Apart from that, there are so many resources available at the university. I mean, just your career office. The career office at Cornell actually helped me get 2 internships abroad, and that sort of added to that development as well, where instead of working in the US, I decided to actually go to the East and work out there. So all of this really, that bit by bit, keeps adding to your personal development, and the goal is to develop at a very wholesome level. And really it comes down to what you make of it, right? All the schools are really great. It really comes down to how you sort of take advantage of all the tools that are available to you in that university.
Great, thanks. And Priyam, you want to talk a little bit about MIT? I can see the river behind you.
Yeah, I wanted to give a pleasant background, but the MIT is quite a bit different from the other Ivy Leagues in terms of the undergraduate experience. MIT has quite an intense initial experience where there's a lot of courses, a lot of technical heavy courses that you're taking your first year or two. So and you spend a lot of time studying for those courses and preparing and solving problems and that sort of stuff. So what happens is MIT undergrads find lots of weird and wacky ways to blow up steam, which forms part of the undergraduate culture. So MIT hacks, if you guys have heard of it, it's basically undergraduates playing pranks on the university. Where this I think, let's see, this dome right here. So that you see that's a 10-story building, and there's a dome on top of that. So MIT undergraduates routinely take things and put it on top of that dome. And it's not easy. It's like they put like a fire truck up there. They put a cop car up there. And they do it overnight. So in the morning you come in and you'll see like something random that's just sitting on top. There's a long corridor at MIT called the Infinite Corridor. So one day I walked into the campus, and I used to walk down with my coffee every morning. I saw that they had converted that entire long corridor. It's like maybe a quarter mile long into a Super Mario Brothers game. So you saw like a giant pipe with the cutout of Mario jumping out of it, these like mushrooms everywhere, boxes with question marks. So it's this kind of this counter-cultural experience that these MIT kids are doing, and they're literally just blowing off steam. Every year the certain undergraduate dorms, they build their own roller coasters. So they just literally manufacture like a full-blown roller coaster. They get a city certified engineer to come in and tell you that it's safe, and then they make the president of the university ride it for the first time. So it's this very weird and like strange but very different experience that MIT undergraduates kind of develop, right? On the other hand, MIT is in the middle of Cambridge, which is right next to Boston. So there's a lot of city stuff to do. Boston has great sports teams. MIT does, the undergraduates and graduates do give away free tickets to baseball games. Fenway Park is right down across the river. There is all sorts of sailing and boating. MIT Sailing Club is very big. It's right, so you can just get out of your dorm room, walk 10 to 20 meters and get into a boat and just start sailing into the Charles River. MIT Outing Club is another thing that is very popular. MIT has a couple of cabins in New Hampshire and Vermont, and this is all, by the way, run by undergraduates. This is all not really, this is done by, of course, it's endorsed by the universities, these are official student clubs, but they're all completely run by undergraduates. So if you like hiking, trekking, climbing, you can always, you can rent out these cabins that are run by the MIT undergraduates and, do all that stuff as well. Of course, it has all sorts of the other clubs that the, that the other Ivy Leagues have, but sort of I wanted to point out these are the kind of weirdly unique things that MIT kind of does. And if you want to learn more about it, just Google like MIT hacks and the MIT culture around hacks, and you sort of find out more about that.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I thought I'll just pitch in and share a little bit about Harvard because I think our Harvard grad couldn't show up today, recent grad, I should say. Although my experience is more business school, I think some of the sentiments that you heard here echo well. Harvard is sort of more academically inclined. They do believe that given sort of their 400-year history, they believe that coaching leaders to really run businesses, and that's sort of the underlying DNA, if you will, of the college and the university. And on the curricular side, I would say that you have far more of a regimented curriculum, but it is deeply insightful. So a couple of very interesting case studies that we had was they try and bring in CEOs of companies to actually teach you cases of companies that have gone through a large, important decision in their lives. So we, for example, had this whole decision on whether Tata Motors, and the board should go out and buy, Jaguar Land Rover. Whereas as a company, as they went and bought that brand. So we actually had, CEO of Tata Motors at that point come and talk to us. We had Mr. Tata talk to us on video. We had the professor, Tarun Khanna, who was a board member of the Tatas, actually simulate a boardroom discussion because he was in the room when they made that decision as to what transpired, what went behind the scenes, and how did that company actually go out and decide to make that decision and what influenced that. So very, very insightful conversations about about business in that sense. And the second piece that I think is very faculty oriented as well is that they're quite accessible. So what I found is that if you had engagements, questions, things like that you wanted to talk to them offline, they were very happy to give you one-on-one time. And I was sort of very fortunate, I think, is that I spent a bunch of time with the current and the previous sort of deans of the business school who actually both from Bombay, incidentally, Dr. Noria before and now Shrikant Datar. And, you can't imagine people like that spend time with you one-on-one and actually talk to you about whatever you want to talk about in life, right? So I think those are sort of some really, really good examples of, of sort of curricular engagement, which is deep. And the second is that from an extracurricular perspective, I think that's a flavor that you have got from the rest of the schools here. I think 80% of the experience of a US education in general, and I think Ivy Leagues in particular, is more extracurricular than curricular, right? Because in curricular, you are obviously as bright as they can be. You've gotten there, you're doing a good job. You have colleagues that are as bright, so that's par for the course. And I think what's interesting is really what you do outside of it that defines, your 3-4 whatever years out there. And I'll share a couple of things. I think one is just deep, meaningful relationships, right? I can't stress that enough. I think the relationships that you build there with people around the world, are just absolutely last you a lifetime, right? And I think that's the most invaluable takeaway from these colleges. So I can't tell you, I've actually done holidays in Lisbon with with my colleagues, to attending weddings in Brazil, to doing get-togethers in Singapore, and so on and so forth. Right, so people really keep in touch after, and I think that's really important, those relationships that you find. And the second, and that's all built outside of the classroom, right? Obviously, and one of the ways that that's built, which is a bit cliche, everybody's talked about sort of partying on the weekends, but sort of Harvard being Harvard had a very interesting, that too in business school, right? You're sort of older, you've made some money in life. We had this one particular Russian sort of, I think she was a daughter of an oligarch or something. So she actually went and took over a bar, right? So went to Harvard Square, which is sort of the main area in Cambridge, and said, "This bar, only our class for tonight, right? Nobody else, everybody else out." So some very interesting experiences that you'll have experiences for life to sort of share in that sense, things that you couldn't think of. But I think those are the ones, I think that, Rishabh, Ravanti, so many of them share that those are the ones that you will remember for the rest of your life, right? So I think with that, let me go around the table for the last time. I'm going to just ask each of you panelists to talk about what your sort of do's and don'ts are, and what your key takeaways. I'm going to combine sort of the last two questions we thought about, so that this is where you tell it like it is. Please share your wisdom and experience with the students here. What would you like to tell them as good, bad, and ugly, for whatever it's worth, and then we'll open it up to Q&A post this. Yeah. So can we go back in the same way, Paritosh? You want to start?
Yeah, I think I've said what I have to say, really. I think the relationships thing is really, really important. Speaking to other students, and which includes graduate students, and speaking to alumni and speaking to professors, that whole thing is just very, very important. And I think that's also really important in graduate school. So to have that going into graduate school is really nice, because then you can actually do stuff with your undergraduate network in graduate school. So if anyone's considering going to graduate school. And I think the other thing is also, one can go in with an idea of like, oh, I will explore. But I also think it's really important to make that a very concrete motivation for you. Like the class that Avanti you mentioned about the New York thing, or I mean, there will be like some classes at university which you simply cannot do outside university, and which will really, really change the way that you approach university. Like I did one course, which was a cadaver dissection course. So we had like a corpse and we cut the whole body up, and like that course is so memorable to me. So I think just being really intentional about at least a few courses that you really want to do is basically my only advice.
Great, thanks. Harshit?
Yeah, I would just say that give it time to just when you for the first time you go there, just give it time to like sleep in and be ready for the culture shock, especially at the Ivies. So Ivies is like a small bubble, and I would say that like most US universities, honestly, the first time you start like expecting, so the picture you have in your mind when you land up at any of these colleges is definitely not going to be precise, might be very off what the actual reality is. So I just say a lot of your freshman year experiences might shape how you would go about the rest of your years at your college. So one of the mistakes I and a lot of international students usually that I've been talking to have said they've made is we just expect certain things and don't give it time to kind of seep in that what the actual culture is, from elitism to the career-oriented people, from almost like 50% of the campus going into finance to like other things such as that. You should really think hard about what it is that you want out of your experience, and give it time to think really about how does life look after college for you. And when you have that mental picture, then sort of like approach your college experience from that. Because one thing I can assure you of all things is it's not going to be what you think it is. And the more open you are to exploration about yourself as well as the surroundings and the possibility of future careers, it's going to be a lot easier in that way to kind of go through college and have a good experience. Just the one thing I'd say is don't make up your mind from your first quarter or your first term, because I know a lot of students just like either get really pissed or either just completely decide what they want to do. And it's usual that they end up changing their mind with the second year or the third year. Like, for example, I changed my major to sociology with computer science in my third year, and I've seen so many students completely change their majors or their plans for careers. So for example, consulting recruiting on campus happens every year in July. So that's your junior summer and your sophomore summer. And people who have been preparing for like consulting case studies for like 2 years and 3 years. But I've seen people completely shift paths from consulting to something completely different because, as college goes by, they realize, oh, it's definitely not what they want to do. So just have an open mind and I think you'll be fine.
Thanks. Parmeet?
So, so one thing I already mentioned, but I'll reinforce that, which is check what the colleges are looking for. So that's something that's very important. When you're working on your essays and your application, I think someone already mentioned this, but it's like be yourself. Try to bring out, who you are through your application. It's much easier said than done. Sometimes we know very little about ourselves. But that's what will make you stand out. And when you're writing your essays, just read them and see like, okay, could anyone have written this? Is it too generic? Or is it something that, reflects who I am? So that's really what's important. There is no golden bullet, right? There is no one perfect person that colleges are looking for. They are looking for different kind of people, so it helps when you, sort of represent yourself and, try to give them a dose of who you really are. And I think the last thing is don't stress. This might be a bit controversial, but it doesn't matter as much as you think. It's not going to make or break your life. Make most of what comes your way. I don't know if me saying all of these things helps at all, but yeah, don't stress. That's it from me.
Thanks, Parmeet. Just to note, you're the only one who has 2 Ivy Leagues against your name. So,
and see, and at the end of it, I'm coming out and saying, actually, it doesn't matter so much, guys.
All right. Great. Abhimanyu?
Yeah, I think I'm glad he said that because the main thing I just want to say to the parents and the students are just take a breath. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things where you go to school. It does make a little bit of difference in the short term, but in the long term, it really is just noise. What's important is to develop the skills, and that's something you can do at any school. That's a function of you and the attitude that you take with you to whatever school you go to. So the last time I said this, I got the feedback like externally that I apparently said I hated Princeton. I don't hate Princeton, but what I'm trying to say is that there's enough people at Princeton that were extremely unhappy for all 4 years. And so right now it might feel like getting into these schools is the end goal. It's just the beginning. And there's no point, putting in all this effort to get into a school because of the name and then only to learn that it's not actually the right fit for you. So spend the time that you need to identify what's important to you, what you care about academically, the kind of life you want to have, whether that's in a city or in a remote. So I have friends that went to Dartmouth that said, great school, but it's too lonely. And so, maybe that's you, maybe you love that sort of environment, but point being, it's much more important to figure out those other aspects of the holistic aspects rather of your college experience. Don't worry about the name. It's really just a name. So I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks. That is certainly sage advice. Avanti?
Yeah, sorry, I was actually making notes. Lose my train of thought.
You want to go back to college?
Do I want to go back to college? I would actually love to do that. Yeah, like without having to take exams, so because I don't think my brain can handle those anymore. So there's a few things. So one is treat your application process like a learning process, as sort of self-discovery, if you will. And I realized that in hindsight, I mean, it's easy for me to see it because I don't have that kind of pressure on me. But I found, and I applied both, to undergraduate schools as well as a bunch of business schools. My strongest essays were the ones in which I've like reflected the most and honestly had the most uncomfortable conversations with myself. So yeah, have those conversations with your friends, whoever you trust, have those conversations with your family members, just so that the essays and whatever unique experiences you bring to the table come out in like the best light. Having said that, also just be prepared, like understand why you want to go to a particular college. I interview for Columbia, and I cannot tell you how many times I have met some truly like stellar students who have really don't have anything to say to me except that, oh, I like New York City, which is great. New York City is great. But the fact is, you can also go to NYU, you can also go to Fordham. There's a ton of universities in New York City. Why are you applying to Columbia? You need to come ahead with that. And that's not just that's just not about Columbia. It's every school. Understand what the unique aspects of each school are and how those will fit into kind of whatever vision you see for yourself. When you're at college, I would strongly encourage you to spend time with people who are different from you. I imagine everybody or most people on this call are from Bombay or India and have grown up here. When you go to college, whether you go to Princeton or Harvard or Columbia or wherever, you're going to meet kids who have trust funds, and you're going to meet kids whose mom had them when they were 15. It's like an entire spectrum of people, and every single person will teach you something. So keep an open mind, get in there and just learn from as many people as possible and make friends with people who are different from you, because that is truly like something transformative. Take classes that scare you. I wish I had done more of that. I like audited, or I took a couple of trial classes with I forget which school it was. I think it was like CPA, which is the public policy school. It was a class called Weapons Strategy and War. And honestly, the professor scared me. He was this retired general and really hardcore, and like the class scared me. So I dropped it, and I wish I hadn't. So yeah, take classes that scare you, and always choose the professors over the classes, because it's the professors that make the class. Like the content might be really interesting, but a professor can really make something really boring. And then the final note I'm going to say is, and specifically for Columbia, if you don't like reading, honestly, just don't apply. It's not worth it, because there's a ton of reading at Columbia, and it can honestly just really bog you down. I really enjoyed my time there, but I wasn't prepared for the amount of reading that I was given, and that kind of blindsided me. And in fact, I was talking to a classmate a few weeks ago, and we were both like, about a year after we graduated, we stopped reading for pleasure, just because we were both like so completely saturated with like books for 4 years. So yeah, that's my feedback.
That's super. I think my takeaway is dare to be different, and I think that's really contrarian advice, which is so true. That's really where your experiences sort of lie, right? Try different things, different friends, all of that. Rishabh?
I think anything I say is just going to be reiterating and summarizing what everybody has already said during the course of this event. But yeah, I mean, don't beat yourself up too hard. Heavens are not going to fall if you don't make that 4.0. You're already high achievers coming from Cathedral. So, I mean, you'll have no option but to do well. You all will do well. It's just that get out of that comfort zone, like Vikas said, and do as much as you can to develop yourself outside. I mean, have that edge. That edge is what's going to define you even later on in career. And I run admissions, undergraduate admissions. I help out with undergraduate admissions for Cornell in India. And that's what we look for. We look for that edge. I'm an employer in the US. And again, we look for that edge. So that grades is par for the course, right? I mean, getting that that high GPA is something that you would expect from most Ivy League students. But how you sort of stand out it really comes down to that. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Great, thanks, Rishabh. And finally, Priyam.
Just basically what everybody else said. Maybe one thing that maybe hasn't been mentioned is don't be afraid to approach professors in their office hours or after, because one thing I think I regret is sort of not talking to more of my faculty members. In most of the cases, the faculty members are literally the world's leading experts on whatever they're teaching you. And talking to them and hanging out with them is like a great experience as an undergrad that maybe you wouldn't realize when you first get there. So if you have if you're a little bit, if you can go to the office and start chatting them up, that's a great thing. And I guess the same thing what everybody else said, don't burn yourself out before you even get there. It's we're beating this to death, but it's an important point that your experience, your first year is going to be a learning curve. So if you're already kind of fed up of learning before you get there, it's not all parties and extracurriculars. There's academics too, and usually for Indian kids, most Indian kids, there is a learning curve associated with sort of getting used to that US system and US style of studying. So I think that's sort of my takeaway.
Super. Thank you so much. I think with that, let's sort of open the floor to questions. I'm going to just, ma'am, you want to, there are not too many questions out there. Shall we just take it in chronological order?
Sure, please. I think I see 3.
Yeah, I've just got one that's come to me direct on my alt ID. So I'm going to start with that since that came in first, and then we'll take the rest. Yeah. So I think the first question is, do you think liberal arts students who have gotten their degrees abroad stand an advantage? Is this directed at someone, or anybody wants to take a crack at this?
Well, I guess I have a clarification question, like advantage over what? Like over people that study it in India, or?
So this is Anushka. Anushka, you want to unmute and ask that question?
Yeah, so I was just I think I was just referring to whether it's better to sort of get a liberal arts degree abroad as opposed to someone who studies it in India, and whether the process of studying liberal arts is a little more nuanced in the US or not.
I would actually love to take that unless anyone wants to.
Go ahead.
So I think what I want to clarify is that the US, all of the Ivy schools are liberal arts based curriculums. That doesn't mean you're studying liberal arts. And so I think in India, there is no such thing as a liberal arts based curriculum. You just have to choose whether you're doing science or humanities or something of the sort. You don't have what the model that's in the US with this liberal arts based education. And so without going into details, that means these schools follow this thing of depth and breadth. So you are encouraged or required to learn a breadth of different subjects and also go into depth in one or a few of them. I think there's a lot of value in the liberal arts based education. And so I think that in terms of, teaching you how to think and exposing you to what's out there, it's definitely a huge advantage to be part of that sort of system. If instead you meant a specific subject of the liberal arts, then I'm not quite sure. I think these schools all offer great courses in whatever you want, but I think that's a separate question altogether.
I'd like to add to what he said, actually. And I agree with all of those points. I think what's really important in a liberal arts education, one is, like you said, breadth, right? So an exposure to a variety of subjects, and this, and and like an exposure to critical thinking and forcing yourself to think outside of the box and also and analyze an issue from different points of view. I don't think you get that anywhere else. It was certainly new to me when I was at Columbia. And, I think what's important is it's one thing to be able to construct an argument and write it in a paper. It's a totally different ballgame when you're in a seminar of 20 people and you're arguing with a classmate about a particular point and the two of you have different points of view. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that, which eventually then translates into, different advantages in other aspects of life, including professional fields.
I'll quickly add something because we have the time.
Sure.
Yeah, the question is interesting because, all these, not all, I guess most of at least the Ivy League schools for the last 300 years have kind of been on this track of liberal arts and, so they've kind of mastered that. Liberal arts is a very new concept in, India. Actually, now there are a few institutions that are offering liberal. It's literally 10 years old as a concept. So in India, if you look at the institutions, you might be better off going to the specialized IIT or, your business schools or, the specialized ones, because they are the most reputed ones. Funny enough, that was a whole journey for me to understand that most of the most reputed institutions in the US are liberal arts based programs. So that's just one clarification.
Great, thanks. So the next question from Yatra is question for Paritosh. How does one prepare for admission for majoring in art/design?
Yeah, okay. So before I answer that question, which I'm not even fully qualified to answer because I think art design is really different from history of art. There's another question about creativity at Stanford. I could talk about that first because it'll set it up. So Ria, you're asking, you said that I said that Stanford values creativity and how is that manifested in the curriculum and what they're looking for. I think, I don't know about the curriculum and how it's tested, but I can just tell you about what Stanford thinks about creativity, which I think is really quite different from how the CAS IB creativity was defined, at least in my school, which was basically if you write a poem, it's creative, or if you do a work of art, it's creative. And if you code a project, it's not creative. Like that's not, I think Stanford thinks about creativity as how valuable is your point of view as we are coming together to solve a particular problem. I think it's like where do you come from? And it's really about problem solving. So it has nothing to do with art or design specifically. I think engineering is extremely creative. Stanford is known for engineering, right? And that's a very creative thing out there. So I think it's really just about, in terms of if you want to write about being creative in your application, think about it as the uniqueness that you can bring to the table when you're discussing a problem. And that could be in any field. And about the art and design thing, I don't really know, Yatra, but I think like one thing that I would say is, I don't know because art and design, as I said, is different from history of art or history of whatever. But for a practice-based course, even I think that a lot of the professors who teach practice-based arts courses are also very much in touch with scholars of the history of those subjects. Then they also know a lot of the theory stuff. So I think that if you could, as long as you're like making a point with your art or making a point with your design or like achieving something or saying something rather than just doing it to express yourself, I think that is something that they would really value. If you had like some idea of maybe a theoretical problem that's going on. This is like maybe also honestly, like, I don't know if undergrads would be expected to like do this stuff. I think this is what they would look at a higher level. But if let's say that there's a theoretical problem that we are not being able to resolve through theory, what can an artwork do in that discussion? And I think that would be a really creative way to go about the question. So maybe I would just focus on thinking of the university that you'll be applying to as also one that is not just a practice-based university, but also engaged with theoretical discussions about art.
Great, thanks. I think we'll take there are 3 more questions I see. We'll take the questions and we'll try and keep it brief and wrap up in about 5 minutes. So question from Avni, can you please tell us more about your experience with undergraduate seminars at Princeton?
Sure. So Princeton has this system of offering undergraduate seminars. They're called freshman seminars because they're only for the first year. And so the idea here is so typically at most schools, the introductory classes are not taught by the most famous professors because they're larger class sizes and sort of just prerequisites. But in order to get students excited about learning, at Princeton, they have this thing called freshman seminars where you'll have some of the most famous professors, everyone from Alan Kruger to Paul Krugman, Dan Kahneman, if any of you have heard these names, they all teach a seminar, and it's a 20-person seminar that's all freshmen and this professor. So it's a little bit, it's really a one of a kind opportunity to interact with people who are some of the most famous and well-known for their work in their field as a freshman when you really know nothing. I personally took a seminar on Sigmund Freud and the analysis of everyday habits. I thought it was fascinating. I didn't do very well, but I think I learned a lot from that. There was another that they offer, which was quite popular, where you start with a motorcycle, you disassemble the motorcycle, clean it, and then reassemble it. And that's the whole class. And as you do it, you learn about the different parts and what they do and why certain things go in certain places and stuff. So it's really an opportunity to explore a new field that you know nothing about with the world leaders in that space in a really small class setting. I think the largest class size for a freshman seminar would be 20.
Great, thanks. I think Ria's question has been answered, so we'll go to the last one. Kush's question for Parmeet. Personally, very interested in social entrepreneurship. I've launched my own startups, but does going to a top prestigious school significantly help if pursuing entrepreneurship? Since entrepreneurship is more based on your own idea rather than university you go to. Question.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's tricky. I mean, when it comes to entrepreneurship, even my experience has been, in many ways, it's so domain specific, context specific. So, how much can you learn from this sort of, generalized education? So I think that's a very good point there. But at the same time, what I would say though is, it gives you perspective, right? I mean, this kind of an education gives you perspective, and you never, once you have a certain perspectives, you really never know, when and where and how they're going to help you. What I learned in economics, I feel helps me understand so many things that I just would not be able to when it comes to macroeconomics, when it comes to monetary policy, that might not directly help me, today with my business, but I feel like, over the longer term, maybe, it gives you certain insights. So I think it's all about perspectives, but at the same time, I'll say, at the end that, like some of the greatest businesses today are run by people who thought college was not good enough. They dropped out and they, directly went into entrepreneurship. So there's no one answer to this question. I think everyone has their own journey.
Great. I'm going to go to the last question in the interest of time. I think it's again from Kush for Avanti. For finance and business in particular, I've heard prestige of university and its ranking makes quite a difference with respect to job placements. So do you think graduating from Columbia and Dartmouth helped you in recruiting and jobs?
So I think for the finance and consulting firms, especially if it's your first job out of college, those companies almost exclusively recruit at like the Ivy Leagues and Stanford, MIT. So I think it's a foot in the door, but once you graduate and build more experience and build up your resume in life, whether you went to Columbia or Dartmouth or didn't go to any of those schools makes less of a difference. But I do think it gets your foot in the door at the start, which is important. Two is, I think it builds a network. Like if all of my friends have worked at top companies, and are still at top companies, both my friends from Dartmouth as well as Columbia. So yeah, I think it does matter. It matters more in the beginning than it does later in life, but I do think it's an important aspect to recruiting at those companies.
Great. So I'm going to sort of take the last crack at adding to this last question. Last two questions are actually quite related with entrepreneur versus jobs, and how does this work? I graduated when I did my MBA from the US. I actually was an entrepreneur, so I came back and ran a business about 10 years, sold that business, and for the last 10 years, I've moved on to the dark side and working on in the corporate world, if you will. So let me sort of be candid in that sense. I think in India there is an undue amount of stress that is placed on the brand that you're associated with. Right? I think we are still in that evolutionary stages of our country, if you will. And therefore, if you're an IIT, IIM, that sense in India, or now, of course, there are some interesting alternatives with with some of the others. But and in the US, if you're with an Ivy League or let's say the top 20 schools, some of them are not classic Ivy but are in the same genre, it makes a massive difference, right? It just makes a difference to how you're perceived in life in general, and I think to what Avanti and the others said, that it gives you a foot in the door. It's a very, very important foot in the door. One step leads to another. I think it's the network, it's the brand, it's the experience. Also, the experience, I think, is just invaluable. So that's something that lasts you forever, and I think that lasts you through your entrepreneurial journey as well, as much as it does in terms of landing you a job and your career. All through and through. Of course, it matters more in the first 10 years, frankly, than sort of after 10 years. What matters is really just what you've done in your career, and not really where you came from. But those first 10 years, you will only get those opportunities if you graduated from the best. So let that sort of be, for whatever it's worth, and an inspiration for you to put your best foot forward. But if I'm allowed to be sort of the most philosophical in the room, because I'm the oldest, you can't make out because I've shaved and come today. But in that sense, that it's don't fret over it. Someone said that, but there's a lot of destiny involved in all of this. Life will take you and offer you the best it has to offer. I think all of us are privileged and should be blessed and thankful for where we are coming from. Both schools, colleges, privileges, and all of that during these times. So give it your best shot. Hope that you can get there. I'm sure otherwise you'll get to an equally good college that will be in store for you. And at the end of the day, treat it as a journey. It's not a destination. It's a journey. It's a start to your life, to adult life, if you will, outside of the haloed walls of Cathedral. So hopefully this was a good hour and a half well spent. Thank you so much, all the panelists, for taking out your precious time and sharing your candid experiences with us. Thank you, students and parents, for joining us, and so Agi and ma'am for giving me the opportunity to chair this. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vikas, once again for coming and doing this for our students and sharing your experiences. And every single panelist has really driven home a point that irrespective of where you go, it's what you do with your years at school and whichever university you go to, which is going to make more of a difference. And so to get off all this stress that they're putting themselves through and be a little more wise in making decisions is a very important message I think you've shared with us today. So thank you once again, and thank you parents, students, and I hope this was helpful to all of you. Thank you.